Have you ever struggled with body confidence and self-acceptance? I think on some level, almost all women deal with that struggle at some stage. And have you ever thought about how this impacts your travels? In today's episode, we hear Hannah Logan's empowering journey of cultivating body confidence and transforming her relationship with her body, all while building a successful career in travel. By the end of the episode, you'll understand how travel can be the catalyst of unlocking self love and confidence, how to build a career doing what you love despite any haters, the pros and cons of traveling solo versus on a group tour, and so much more. Let's go. Hi, I'm Kelly Tolliday, founder of Transform with Travel and your trusted guide to life-changing adventures. Here, we help you dream big, plan smarter, and embark on your next journey without stress or overwhelm. This isn't just about booking trips. It's about reimagining what's possible for yourself, one adventure at a time. Today, we're bringing you one step closer to your greatest travel dreams. So buckle up because we are about to take off. Hey there, friend. Thank you so much for being here and choosing to spend time today learning, growing, and connecting with me. We just found out that we are among the top 10 wellness travel podcasts in the world. And I'm just so excited to share that information because you work so hard on a project like this. And it's not always something that like, is this going to be something people want to listen to? Is this something people are going to want to listen to again and again? And I'm just so grateful that you are here listening each and every week with me. Honestly, this podcast could not survive without you listening. Every single time that I see that there's people listening to the podcast and that episodes from even months ago are still getting traction, it just is like a little reminder, like keep going. It's a lot of work and a lot of love, and I love it so, so much. But to be able to get this recognition of being, among the top 10 wellness travel podcasts in the world, according to FeedSpot, it's that little push that you need as a entrepreneur. So any of my entrepreneurs listening, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Even like as like motherhood, sometimes you just need a little pat on the back by somebody being like, you're doing a good job. So this whole month, we're actually sharing stories of incredible women within the travel industry who have incredible stories through travel. And today we get to hear from Hannah Logan. And I'm really glad that you're listening to this episode today, actually, because this episode in particular, it highlights a really important conversation around body acceptance and confidence, which many women, including myself, struggle with at some points in their life. And, as you travel, there are so many like confrontations with that, or like friction points of your relationship with your body. And while you're traveling, there's a lot of opportunities to be in a bathing suit. There's a lot of opportunities of cultural discrepancies in terms of respect of different body types. So I'm just really grateful that Hannah decided to come on the podcast with us today. We've actually known each other for a really long time virtually. So it was so nice to be able to put our faces together and actually have an in-person, or I guess a virtual conversation, but not just through Instagram or through email. Hannah Logan is a curvy adventure traveler from Ottawa, Canada. She got hooked on travel at the age of 22 when she got on her first plane to Ireland and hasn't looked back since. She's visited 80 countries so far, most of them solo, and runs her business as a travel blogger, freelance writer, influencer, and content creator to encourage and promote travel and adventure for everyone and everybody. So I'll stop yapping. We'll get to this fascinating conversation. We'll see you on the other side. Hey there, welcome to the podcast today. As part of our Amazing Women in Travel series, I've got Hannah Logan here with me today, and we have been connected now for, it seems like over a decade. We got connected with like an online travel content creator group back in, I think like 2014, 2015, something like that. So I'm really excited that you're here today with us because I just love seeing your work and your success and your passion grow over the years. So thank you so much for being here.
And thank you for the invite to be here.
I am really excited to dive into our conversation around what it's like to be a content creator, what it's like to be a group trip leader, what it's like to be a leader within the body positivity, self-love space, especially in the world of travel. But first, we are going to play our little Transform with Travel game, Two Truths and a Lie Travel Edition. Do you think you can try to trick me here?
We're going to give it a go. As we said, you've followed me for a long time, so you might know some of these. I'm known for like my misadventures, so we're kind of kicking off with that theme. So number one, I almost got kicked off a flight to the Seychelles for a press trip because I didn't have the correct paperwork. Number
Okay.
two, I got on the wrong train when in Switzerland at night, and the conductor had to personally find me a bus that would take me back to Geneva. Or number three, I ordered a taxi to the wrong airport in Paris and had to race across the city and pay an extra $150 to get to the right one in time.
Oh my gosh. Those are all so specific. I feel like they could all be real. I'm gonna go with the Seychelles one.
No, that's true.
Oh, that's true. Oh my God, you
That's
poor
true.
thing.
That's a
Wait, let
recent
me try again.
transit.
Let me try again.
Okay, okay.
The Geneva, Switzerland.
No, that's also true.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so the one that's the lie is Paris.
The Paris one, which to be fair is kind of based on a truth because I did go to the wrong airport in Paris. However, I took a bus. I was in my broke backpacker days, and by the time I got there, it was way too late, and I completely lost my flight and had to book
Oh
another one.
my gosh. See, that's how you play the game right. Like you use a truth, but you mix in a lie within the truth. Because I knew there was a story about a wrong airport somewhere in there. That's
Oh,
why I was
there's
like, no,
multiple wrong airports. Trust me.
nobody has duped me yet on two in a row. So you win
Oh,
on being
okay, okay. I
the
win.
best liar out of all the
Gold
guests,
star. Like that's lots. Add it to my resume.
right?
So good.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. As I mentioned, we're a part of this Women in Travel series celebrating women of all walks of life, all body types, all races to be able to share the amazing things that women are doing within the travel industry. And taking it back a step, like way back at your very first trip, your first international trip was to Ireland when you were 22, which is, quite young. Can you tell about that experience and kind of what you learned about yourself on that trip? Why, like, what about that trip really opened your eyes to be like, whoa, there's this big wide world out in front of me?
So not only was it my first trip, it was like my first time on a plane.
Oh, wow.
Grew
Okay, so
up, yeah.
you went full
I
send.
went full into it. I grew up in Ottawa, Canada. I was born and raised here. I went to university here, stayed at home rather than a residence to save money. And I was actually meant to do a semester abroad in Wales my third year. And unfortunately, my dad got sick. I had to cancel that. And, I had worked like 3 jobs in the summer. I had all this money saved up. So upon graduation, when I was 22, I was like out in the world, had this degree, had no idea what I wanted to do with it. But I was like, I really feel like I missed out. So I kind of impulsively got a working visa to go live in Ireland. And I searched Ireland on Google and I found a picture of Galway and I'm like, that looks great. And I found random roommates online and I was like, they seem sane. And I just went for it. And it did not work out at all as planned. As I said, I went
Oh,
with a
no.
visa and I was like, I'm going to get a job and I'm going to work and I could be here for, a couple years even. And I lasted 3 months because I did not get a job. I did not find work. I instead discovered Ryanair and EasyJet and how cheap and easy it was to travel around Europe. So I literally traveled until I had $11 left in my bank account. I was like, oh, okay, I better change that flight home and get home and actually make some real money. But, you know, my first time like being out, being independent, and I think especially after my dad being sick and like my life changing, I just kind of got a taste for adventure and independence, and life just suddenly seemed so much more exciting. And I was like really happy when I hadn't been happy for a while. And it was like, this is what I love and I want to do more of it, which is kind of also how the blog got started because, again, that was 22, that was 2011. So, like, pre Instagram, pre WhatsApp, and everybody being able to keep up easily. And I was so tired of emailing everybody the same thing over and over again to let them know what I was up to. So, I started my travel blog, Eat, Sleep, Breathe, Travel, as a journal for my stories and misadventures, of which we just went through a couple. And yeah, it all just kind of kicked off from my failed work abroad experience in Ireland.
I love that. That's like the ultimate taking, like, it wasn't a failure. It launched your entire life and your career. Like, I
Yeah.
think that's so, you were able to take something where most people would have been like, hey, I didn't find a job. I didn't find a roommate. I didn't find this. I didn't find that. And I'm just going to go home because, tail between my leg type of thing. And you were like, screw that. I'm going to go and build my life around it. So I think that's really cool. And you mentioned your blog, Eat, Sleep, Breathe, Travel, as part of a diary. I have a similar story too. That was mine as well. When I was over in Europe, I was tired of texting or emailing, and I just like, I'm just going to do like a diary. Basically, that's how it all started, and that's eventually how you and I connected, was through our blogs.
Yep.
So, talk me through a little bit about when you decided to make that leap from, okay, you've had this experience now hopping around Europe. You went back home with $11 in your pocket. You started this blog. Where was that transition that you went from just a traveler and, enjoying your travels and maybe letting your friends and family know what's happening to then becoming a full-time travel writer, content creator? Like, was there a defining moment that really pushed you to pursue that?
So I kind of learned in 2014, that's kind of when, again, we probably met around then, and those Facebook groups are starting and people are talking about, doing these collaborations with hotels and tourism boards and monetizing blogs through ads and affiliates. And I'm like, wait, my little journal could maybe make money because at this point, random people are finding you and they're going, oh, these are funny stories. And you have a Facebook page. And so I started to look into SEO and all of that would actually turn my stories into potentially, helpful guides and tips for other travelers. And it was still very much hobby side hustle. And at the same time, I started to do a little bit of freelance writing in the travel realm. And at that time, my background, my degree was in criminology. I worked for a national victims organization for a few years, burnt out, moved on to something completely different, which was cake decorating. Like I went from dealing with victims to making wedding cakes. And in that job, it's very seasonal. So when the winter months would come, I'd be like, okay, bye, see you. I'm going to Asia for 4 months. I'm going to Europe for 3 months, whatever. And I would travel, spend all my money, and I'd come back and go back to work. So I was still getting a lot of stories and a lot of travel content. And, after changing my website over and getting more opportunities, starting to get into the affiliate realm, it was 2017. And I was like, I wonder if I'm at the point where I could actually do this. It sounds really funny, but I was in Southeast Asia and I was in Bali. And, they have the magic men, right? Which eat, pray, love. We learned about them then.
Yes.
And I've always been skeptical, but also interested. And I found one near Ubud. It was about an hour away, actually. That's not that near. But they were willing to come and pick me up. And I had a couple of friends from my house. So I was like, let's do this. Just for shits and giggles. Let's go to this magic man. And he read my palm. And all I told him was my birthday and whatever. And he just went on this deep dive. And he's like, you're never going to be happy working for anybody else. You're a very creative person. You're a very independent person. You will succeed at whatever you want. And even if you don't, you're a hard worker and you'll find work elsewhere. And I'm like, this seems oddly on point for where I'm at in my life right now. I thought I was here for a joke, and yet you're actually speaking to me. So I was like, you know what? Let's go. So I came home from Southeast Asia. That was 2016. Came home from Southeast Asia, end of 2016. 2017 was my first year working for myself, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was terrible. I made no money. I got a ton of press trips. I made no money, but it was a learning block, and I had enough savings to keep going. And every year since then, it's kind of built up, and this industry keeps changing and you have to kind of change with it. And it's kind of a go with the flow, and it's constantly learning, constantly figuring things out. But I have been able to keep and grow my business over the years to the point where, I have been able to do this, luckily, full time since 2017.
Yeah, and I feel like that's such a good point for people who, especially the term influencer now. When you started, there was no term for influencer. We were bloggers, we were creators. The word influencer wasn't really getting thrown around till that 16, 17, probably closer to 2018. And I think that's a powerful point for people to remember, that you didn't just become successful overnight. You didn't just amass these followers overnight. These tourism boards didn't just reach out to you overnight. You really started 2011 all the way to now, learning, growing, adapting, and things take time to build. Your skills take time to build. So I think in an age where everyone's trying to find quick fix, quick fame, quick money, I think it's important to remember it has taken you almost a decade to build up a very sustainable and stable business. And I think I remember listening to Samantha Brown, the TV show host, and she was talking about her story of she gave herself 10 years in New York to make it on Broadway or whatever she was trying. I think it was Broadway going after. I'm like, wow, nobody gives themselves 10 years to do anything. It's 1 year. Okay, no, I failed. I'm out. I think that's awesome that you've been able to keep at it, and that flexibility and that adaptability is really important. We'll get back to the show in just a moment. I want to take a quick moment to share with you a remarkable case where Arch Roamrite Travel Insurance truly came to the rescue. Picture this, a once-in-a-lifetime cruise off the coast of Antarctica. For one traveler, this dream adventure quickly turned into a medical nightmare. While aboard the cruise, a man in his 70s began experiencing severe diabetic complications, including high blood sugar, seizures, and an inability to walk or stand. With the cruise ship's medical facilities unable to handle the emergency, he was transferred to a remote research center in Antarctica with only a small hospital, which also lacked the facilities to provide adequate care. This is where Arch Wainwright stepped in. With the situation rapidly escalating, arrangements were made for an urgent medical evacuation to Australia. There, the traveler received the care he needed, and after a few days of monitoring, he was deemed fit to fly back home to continue his recovery. This case highlights the importance of being prepared for the unexpected. Emergencies in remote locations, especially on ocean cruises, can be challenging to manage. But with Arch Wainwright Travel Insurance, travelers are never alone. In this case, the $72 the traveler paid for his travel insurance plan covered what would have been a devastating expense of $215,786. With Arch Wainwright, you can be supported by an award-winning team ready to assist when unexpected events happen. Don't leave your next adventure to chance. Protect yourself with travel insurance that can be there when you need it most. Check out the show notes to use my personal affiliate link to get a quote today. Thanks to Arch Wainwright for supporting our show. One of the things that you've adapted, I guess, in the last, I don't know how many years, at least from my perspective, probably last 5 or 6 years, is speaking a lot more on your social media. Of course, you have travel content, but you're also speaking a lot about the body positivity movement, self-love, appreciating yourself, not letting, your body type dictate where you go or how you go or what you do. And it's something that I've always really appreciated about you. You're quite a leader and a voice in this movement now, and you've mentioned before on your page and in your blog that travel has played a big role in teaching you to love and appreciate your body. Are you able to share some of your early experiences as a young traveler that might have initially challenged you in this space?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say body image has always been something I've struggled with. And, we grew up in the nothing tastes as good as skinny feels generation, which,
Yes.
even looking back to the movies that we watched in our teenage years, I'm like, oh my God, this is so fat phobic. No wonder I have so much trauma and hate my body. Well, hate it. I mean, it's an ongoing process. But yeah, so when I started travel, I, as a person, I love the water. I grew up with a family cottage on the lake. I love swimming. I love all of that. Hated swimsuits, hated having to shop for swimsuits, being seen as swimsuit, all of that. So traveling solo when I started, in the off seasons, I would travel to destinations where, there were no beaches, places where cities where I could stay covered up and I wouldn't have to be seen in swimwear, which was great for a lot of reasons because, I got to see a lot of cool places, but at the same time, it wasn't really me. I wanted to go to the beaches, but I didn't feel comfortable ever going to those beaches. So I would say the big thing is 2015, I decided I'd been traveling through Europe for a few years at that point, and I decided I really wanted to go to Southeast Asia, which was scary, most scary because I had heard from other female travelers there's a lot of fat shaming that happened there. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for this, but I want to give it a try. And before I went there, my old roommate in Ireland actually was getting married. So I hopped to Ireland first. I spent a couple weeks in Europe, went to this wedding, and then went over to Asia. And before his wedding, I actually ended up going to Croatia. And it was one of the first beach destinations that I'd been to. And again, somewhere I really wanted to go to. I'm like, well, if I'm going to Southeast Asia, I could go to Croatia. We'll ease into it. And I was on the beach in Zadar, and it was September. And it was so hot. It was 40 degrees Celsius, and it was just melting. And I was sitting on the beach, and I was like, I need to go in the water. So I had a swimsuit, which at the time was shorts and one of those loose tankini tops. And I went in the water, and which was also really hot, came out and immediately put on this baggy, oversized swimsuit cover up kind of dress thing because God forbid anybody see me. And I'm sitting there on the beach sweating in this black cover up, and everybody around me is just in their swimsuits. And I see this woman on the beach who is probably in her 60s, early 70s, like a grandma, running around after her little grandkid. And she's wearing a bikini. She's in her 70s. She's had kids, whatever. She has not the most toned body. She's curvier, and nobody cared. And she didn't care. And she just looked amazing, having this fun time with her grandson on her beach, living her best life. And that's kind of when it just kind of clicked for me. I was like, the only reason I look ridiculous on this beach right now is not because of my size. It's because of what I'm wearing, because it's so hot and I'm sitting here covered up. And that was really flipped a switch for me. And then, I went to Asia, And it wasn't always easy. I remember looking for the famous like elephant pants, and they weren't even for me. I was looking for my best friend at home who was like 6 foot tall, size two. And I'm scrolling through the racks, and the vendor comes up to me and he goes, "No, no, no, you're way too big." And I'm like, "Oh, it's not for me." He's like, "No, not for you here. You'll break, you'll damage, not for you here. Get out. You're too big." And I was mortified. But at the same time, then I go to Vietnam and I went to some of like the tailors where they custom make clothing, and they're like, "Oh my God, your curves, blah, blah, blah." So it was just like, there were some bad experiences, but there were also some like feel good experiences. And I just went with the flow. And, I'd hike the rice paddies in Vietnam, and I went to Myanmar to Bagan. At that time, you could climb the temples. And I was like climbing up the temples with everybody, doing my thing. And I learned how to scuba dive. And I'm like, my body's letting me do all of these amazing, incredible things and giving me all these unreal memories. Why do I hate it so much? So that for me was when things really started to turn around. And as you said, that's kind of when the whole influencer thing kind of started, and Instagram really kicked off being more than just like a pretty photo. Like you kind of wanted to see the person behind the photo. So previous to that, all my social media, I wasn't in it. And then I started posting photos of myself, and just like the idea that, bigger bodies can do things too. Bigger bodies can also be on beaches, and just kind of like change that narrative from what I had seen growing up, which was only just like straight size, skinny, fit women in these tropical, beautiful travel destinations.
Yeah, and when you started posting about that, like, putting yourself in front of the camera instead of just, the natural landscape, did you get, like, messages of support, or what was happening during that time when I'm assuming that you probably would have been one of the early influencers in that space? So, what was that like for you in terms of receiving support or perhaps receiving some pushback?
So from a purely business perspective, it was actually funny because as soon as I started putting myself in photos, like I could see the increase in likes alone. And I'm like, oh, this is good. And I've been really lucky because I would say, being online as a woman in general and having a public social media account can be so scary. And you can get just like the worst messages, no matter your body shape or size or what you look like. And I've been really lucky with my Instagram community, especially. They've been so supportive. And the more support I got there in the beginning, the easier it became to post photos of myself, like full body photos, and start doing campaigns with brands. Like I do a lot of swimwear campaigns right now. And I could not imagine 18-year-old me, the idea that I would like even just share a photo of myself in a swimsuit, much less wear a bikini, much less get paid and send these swimsuits to share. Like it just blows my mind, right? But no, I've been really lucky, and I've had so much positive feedback from my community, which has been great in pushing myself too. I had an opportunity in 2019 to work with a travel company that did travel photo shoots, and I was in Santorini, and I was so nervous that morning that I like actually wanted to throw up. I was like, this is awful. Like, who do I think I am? I'm not one of these Instagram girls. Like I don't want to do this. And I told the photographers as soon as I saw him, I think I just like, word vomited how scared I was. And he just looked at me and laughed. He's like, it's just fun. You're fine. It's just you and me. We're taking some pictures. And he made me really feel comfortable, and he kind of taught me how to pose. And I was like, oh, this is not so bad. And then I saw the photos. I was like, oh, I actually like these. Like, I think I look good. I think I look pretty. I look happy. So that was a confidence boost too. And it's just been an interesting growth in the relationship between social media and the positive feedback, and then encouraging me to get these photos and work with photographers and work, in some ways, like as a model for some companies. And then that gets shared to social media, and I get more positive feedback. So it's a funny relationship. It's a good relationship. It's been positive for me. Of course, there will always be trolls online who find your photos and leave really nasty comments. And again, that's a very unfortunate part of social media and online in general. But for the most part, Instagram has been very positive for me, and it's been a really good relationship there.
And speaking of online trolls, I know you have a story of some online hate turning into quite a successful partnership with, I believe, a swimsuit brand and a press trip. Can you share how that little comeback story? Because I think for anyone who's starting a new business, but particularly when you're in a space where you are sharing on the internet, or you're vulnerable, or you're on social media, it can be easy to pack up the bags with your first hateful comment. Oh no, I'm done. I'm out of here. I don't want to do this anymore. So can you explain a little bit about how you like overcame that within your own mindset and then how that actually translated into a successful partnership for you?
Yeah, so it was a couple of years ago, so 2023, and I had just run one of my group trips through Greece. It was a sailing trip through some of the islands, and it was so much fun. I had a great time, and I had requests to do it again. So upon launching my group trip for 2024, shared a photo of myself standing on a beach in Greece. It was actually in a surf suit, so it was like full arm coverage, like one piece, had a zip front, and it was just me. The photo was of my back looking out to the ocean and then the sailboat in the distance. And I shared it on Instagram, and then I have Instagram push things automatically to my Facebook page. And so I tend to be definitely more active on Instagram, monitor that more, and sometimes my Facebook gets forgotten. And I signed into Facebook like 2 days later, and it had just gone viral in the worst way. And not even in English, but in Greek because I had
Oh my gosh.
geotagged the
Oh my
location
gosh.
to
Oh, no.
Greece. So I suddenly have like hundreds of thousands of views on this photo, thousands
Oh my God.
of comments that I don't even understand because it's in Greek. And I started translating some, and I was just like, "Oh, no." And to be fair, there were a lot of women, especially that came through for me and, like, really jumped on and defended me in those comments, which was, like, lovely to see. But there's still, the few that I did translate were it's always, like, a mix. It's either you get people who tell you you're, like, disgusting and should die, or you're super sexy, and then you get, like, really creepy sexual messages
Oh
about
my
it. Like,
God.
you get both, and they're both
That's
awful.
wild. It's wild
Um,
what people think
yeah,
is okay.
yeah, and it just took off, and it just, like I was like, "It'll die soon," and it just kept going and going, and I had to eventually, like, play with my settings, and I had to turn off comments on that. Well, then people would come, see they couldn't comment, and look for other photos of me on my Facebook page and start commenting on that, and I had to, like,
Right.
really rig my settings on Facebook there for a while. But with all of these comments coming through, I get a message from this Greek company that does small boat cruises. And they're like, "Oh, hey, like we found you on your post. We see you do group trips to, Greece, and you've been to Greece and stuff. Like, we'd really like to work with you. Do you want to come to the Seychelles?" So 9 months later, after all this hate message, I got brought out. I did this trip to the Seychelles with a really good friend of mine as a press trip. And the best part is there's also a Canadian swimsuit company, and she was looking for photos for her account, and I like her swimsuits, and she sent me a handful of swimsuits and paid me to take photos of them. So I'm like living my best life in Seychelles, getting paid to take swimsuit photos after, a photo of myself in a swimsuit blew up and got so much negative comment. So a lot of good came from that bad. And it's kind of, at the time, it was rough, obviously, because nobody
Yeah.
wants to see those comments, especially like some of the, more aggressive ones when they just tell you to die and go kill yourself. But I was sitting on that beach in the Seychelles in that swimsuit, and I was like, kind of felt like a good fuck you
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say a big middle
in the
finger.
best way, in the best way. Yeah, yeah. I was like, "Ha, take that. I'm living my best life, and you're just an angry troll behind a computer." So that's definitely one of my best like feel good stories.
How do you manage that in your mind? Like, do you just compartmentalize and say these people don't matter? Do you just like put your blinders on? How, like, what is that? What's going through? I guess maybe you've gotten better at it over the years, but how do you manage the emotion behind seeing such like hate sometimes that's just so unnecessary?
I think it really depends on the day and my mood because
Mm,
sometimes it just brings me down so much. And other days I'm like, well, they're stupid. And then other days, I just get really angry and petty and just like want to fire back my own comments. Like, I'm sorry, like you just can't help yourself. Sometimes you look at the picture of the person that messages you and you're like, really? You're saying this about me? Really? But I have learned like the best thing for me is to just delete and block. It's the easiest thing, and it's easier on Instagram than Facebook. But, again, I've learned that you can change your settings and adjust who can comment, what can comment. And I think social media in general, I know Instagram, you can just kind of like block some specific words, right? That has become helpful as well. I have certain phrases that, if someone says it in my comments, it's just not going to show. I'm not going to see it, which is great. But delete and
right.
block is my go-to mentality.
Yeah, it's like controlling what you can control in that sense. So that makes sense for sure. you've been a travel writer and content creator now we've mentioned for over a decade, but you've mentioned group trips. You've eventually began hosting group trips. What inspired you to kind of start this new chapter? Because going from freelance, independent content creator to then hosting groups of people, and I know I've been doing this for 8 years now, running retreats and group trips. It's a whole nother ballgame. So what inspired you to kind of start this new chapter and lead people to the amazing places that you love?
I got pushed into it. It was so I was part of a Facebook group for travel writers, and I had connected with a contact that worked for Intrepid Travel. And she had me write a couple of posts on their site just about like plus size travel in Asia and, travel experiences in Egypt. And she's like, you write a lot for us. Can I send you on one of our trips? And like, you could write about that. And at that point, I had never done group travel before. I was very much an independent traveler. And I was like, sure, like I would like that. And she goes, what do you want to do? And I was like, okay, something that I probably wouldn't be able to do on my own. And I was like, what about sailing in Greece? I'd always wanted to go to Greece. And she's like, sure. So she sends me on this sailing trip to Greece and I share it and I have a great time. And there's just so much positive feedback of it. And I'm talking to her after. She goes, I think you should run group trips. I'm going to connect you to our tailor-made tour team. I think, and I was like, no. And she's like, yes. And I was like, no. There's like a difference, like somebody following you and liking your pictures and somebody actually going, oh yeah, I would like to travel with this complete random stranger. I just did not see it at all. She goes, no, you'd be really good. Like, she's like, trust me, you'd be good at it. And it was a back and forth for a while. Like she really pushed and I was like, fine. Again, growing your business, seeing what happens. So I was like, okay, fine. So I got in touch with the team at Intrepid that does like the tailor made, and we planned to do that same Greece sailing trip that I had done. Of course, it was planned for 2020. We all know how 2020 went in terms of travel. So that was pushed off a couple of times and to the point where I just had to cancel it because of all the lockdowns and the travel restrictions. And I kind of thought that was the end of it until during endless lockdowns, I was trying to stay relevant on social media and Instagram stories. And I was like, if you guys had like one dream trip and you could go anywhere we want right now, like where would you go? And put it in a question box. And the overwhelming answer was Antarctica. And I was like,
Oh,
huh. And I just
wow.
kind of looked, I have this big, massive world map around me, which has Antarctica. And I was sitting in my bed and I kind of looked over at my map and I'm like, I've been saving money during the pandemic. Like I've been lucky enough to find some work in freelance writing on personal finance. So like things were fine. And I was like, oh, I'd really like to go to Antarctica too. And I was always thought it would be a spot I'd go when I was older and retired because it's so expensive. And then I just did some digging and I was like, oh, Intrepid runs trips to Antarctica. And they're actually one of the more affordable ones. So I got in touch with the team again. And they're like, yeah, let's make it happen. And so my first ever group trip after all that planning and everything actually ended up being an 11-day trip to Antarctica in January of 2023. I had 11 people with me, 10 women and 1 man, and I didn't know a single one of them. And I was so scared. I had like a Facebook group ahead of time. I had a WhatsApp group for us. And before we met, I stared at everybody's photos, tried to like memorize their face and their name. And it turned out to be worry for nothing because Antarctica itself was an incredible experience. But the people that came with me were incredible. And it was like instant friendship. And I was like, why did I push this so hard? Because running these group trips, I feel I'm very much myself on social media. And my mindset is like, if you think you're going to get along with me, you're probably going to get along with other people who are going to get along with me. And we just ended up having this, like, we called it like our little boat family. And everybody got along. And we all still, 2 years later, we still have our group chat. We still keep in touch. Many of the women that came with me have come on other group trips with me. We're planning maybe just like unrelated to my group trips, just like a girls' trip. We talk all the time. And that's been a theme for my group trip since. Like it inspired me to do more. I just did my second Antarctica trip. It was a 23-day one. And again, we had like our little boat family. And it was like a group of strangers that I now consider friends. So for something that I pushed back on so hard, it's actually become probably my favorite part of my business right now. And in a world where being a content creator and traveling this much kind of makes you a weirdo in some circles, I feel like this has allowed me to find people, and not necessarily in terms of the work itself, but in terms of people who love the kind of travel and adventures that I do.
You mentioned that you guys became a boat family and that you're still connected, to this day. Do you find that you attract like a similar set group of people? Like you mentioned, people that like you on social media might like you in person. Like, how have you found that having that sense of community helps some of these women and men who are coming on your retreats, like, or on your trips? How do you think that helps them travel the world in a different way? Or have you found that they're scared to, but being in a group has helped them? What's been kind of the common frame of mind, I guess?
I think in terms of, attracting people, I think the comment that I get probably the most online in, what I do and sharing online is that I am relatable, which I think is just like the biggest compliment. And it was funny because I did a group trip to Kenya this fall and I actually brought my mom with me. It was her dream to do an African safari and I was doing 2 Africa trips and I was like, why wouldn't I bring my mom? Again, like I've had luck with like these amazing people on my trips. I could just go with her. I could like go with a group of strangers or I could bring her with one of mine. And my mom, being my mom, takes people aside and goes, "So is Hannah what you thought what she would be based on what you see online, like in real life? Is she?" Which I think is hilarious. But everybody said yes. And I got that comment again on my Antarctica trip from one of the girls. She'd followed me for years. I'd met her for the first time. She goes, "You are exactly in real life what I thought you would be based online." And I was like, okay, this is awesome. So I think that helps too, just to kind of build a community. I mean, asking people to travel with you anywhere for any set of time, like they kind of pretty brave jumping on board with a complete stranger? But as I said, like it's lucked out for me because I have these friends and I think I try to like a real variety of people, but I would say for the most part, it is women who love travel and maybe don't necessarily have people that want to travel with them to some of the destinations they want to go to. I try to do kind of like adventure travel in places that you might necessarily not want to go on your own or just because it would be more fun because it's social and you have some friends, or maybe just kind of like a safety, security reason. And yeah, it's worked out really well. And as I said, like I got a bunch of new friends and I love this part of my business.
That's awesome. And so you've traveled extensively, both solo and now as a group tour leader. What are some of your personal pros and cons of solo travel and group travel?
One of the biggest pros of group travel that I make a joke about is that there's somebody to watch your bags when you have to go to the
Oh my
bathroom at
God,
like an
so
airport or train
true.
station,
So
right?
true.
Like, how many times are you just like, you don't want to put your bag on the floor, the door doesn't have a hook, or else, like I travel with a lot of camera gear. I'm like, that hook's not gonna hold
Mm-mm.
my bag. So then you're trying to like hover over a toilet with a backpack. Like it's just a nightmare. And so it's a regular joke. I'm like, you have somebody to watch my bags. But no, there's like a lot of perks to both. And I do genuinely love both. The couple of things that I really notice with group travel is I have somebody to go to dinner with, which I'm not against eating dinner by myself, but sometimes when you're in a new city, you don't necessarily just want to go out by yourself, especially, if you land and it's dark and you're not really sure everything. I always just keep granola bars in my bag for nights like that. And I'm like, I will figure out everything tomorrow and I'll just eat a granola bar for dinner. But here, if I have a group of friends, I'll be like, okay, we're fine. We're a group. Like, let's go. Group activities, sometimes traveling solo, you want to do something and you might find a tour and it'll be like, you need minimum 2 people, you need minimum 3 people. Like I've been kind of screwed over a few times because of my solo travel status in that regard. But, and I would especially say as a tour leader, there's a lot of organization and I pack my trips. I try to keep them busy and I tell people like, this is adventure travel. We're trying to make the most. I'm trying to get the most for your money and it's going to be busy. And it can be more tiring versus when I'm by myself. It's like I want to break for a day. Okay. I have a break for a day and I sit in bed and watch Netflix instead of going out for a couple of hours, and you can't really do that when you run group trips. So I think it's a balance. Like I definitely love both and there's pros and cons to both, but it's for someone who traveled exclusively solo, I wasn't sure that I would like the group trip thing, but I'm enjoying it a lot more than I had anticipated.
Yeah, I really appreciate the pros and cons list because I think not even pros and cons, just the differences, I guess. And the thing with group travel, and I've led group travel for 8 years now, is you kind of get a little bit of that peer pressure. Like, okay, today's the day I'm going to relax and read my book. But then you hear some rumblings in the group. Well, we're going to go on a little side trip to a waterfall or we're going to go shopping. And you're like, ooh, should I rest or should I go with the group? And it's like sometimes you
Right.
wrestle a little bit with like what your personal intention is and then getting a little bit of FOMO about what the rest of the group is, which can be a
The
beautiful
FOMO is
thing if you're
real.
someone who needs to be pushed to go do things too. So, yeah, totally, benefits to both. Do you have any tips for somebody who might be looking at a group tour or looking like, hey, I might want to do a retreat. I might want to do a group trip. Do you have any tips or advice that somebody like what should they look for in terms of making sure they're making the right selection for themselves?
Based on my own experiences, some of the feedback that I have gotten, I mean, obviously, kind of like, especially if it's another company or whatever, like read reviews, see what other people are saying, if that's possible. See if, especially if you're doing a trip with an influencer or something, like, does your travel style match theirs? Because if it doesn't, then it's probably not going to be the best fit. Look at the itinerary. I've had, as I said, like my itineraries are busy. And I've had a couple people say sometimes, like, I love it, but I could use a day of rest. And just, ask the questions. I think I've, had a couple of people on trips before where I think they're more excited about the idea of traveling with me and making friends and maybe jump on that rather than necessarily the itinerary itself. And it's the itinerary maybe isn't the best fit for them. Just could be a bunch of things, like maybe it's not like maybe you travel higher end normally and it's not up to your typical standards. Could be, a climate that you're not used to and maybe don't really enjoy spending time in, stuff like that. So, especially when it comes to influencer trips, does the person you're going to travel with, is that a travel style you think you would enjoy? And don't forget about the destination itself too.
Yeah, so true. Like, don't get wrapped up in the influencer, the leader, and don't get wrapped up in who they are as so much. At also being aware of the destination that you're going to. I think it's a good balance. Like, thinking about those 2 things, I think that's really good advice. And you mentioned at the very beginning of this episode that when you were considering going to Southeast Asia, you had heard that there were some destinations that were fat phobic or not as accepting of all body types. Do you have any advice for somebody who might be searching on places where to go, who will feel welcomed and who will have perhaps an easier time traveling? Do you have any destinations that come to the top of your mind that were really, really easy to travel to and maybe some destinations that you might not go back to again because it wasn't as welcoming?
In terms of body, I mean, the problem with travel is it can be so independent based on people's experiences,
Exactly.
right? Like, I loved Vietnam. I know people that hated Vietnam. I had a really rough time in Morocco, which not even necessarily for the size of my body. I think it was, just I'm curvy. I have boobs. I have a butt. I also have lighter hair and blue eyes. And I was like target number one. And I got harassed nonstop. And, I never want to tell people don't go to Morocco, but I want to share. I have a whole blog post on my experience in Morocco and just kind of a precaution for women who think they want to travel by yourself. But at the same time, I have friends who are also lighter skin, lighter eyed, fair, or whatever, and they had a great time in Morocco and they didn't experience that. So I'm really hesitant to say, like, avoid these places or go to these places. But I will say, as a Canadian, I do find that North America is harsher in terms of just like body image and being judgmental than a lot of other places.
Wow.
Like, even again in Europe, Croatia, I felt fine on the beach. France, I felt fine on the beach. Greece, I was like, I had the comments and stuff that like I was fine on the beach. No one has ever looked at me on a beach and made a cruel comment. You know what I mean? So if you're not sure and you're really uncertain, like, find an influencer, find a creator who has a body type similar to yours that has been there and ask them, because a lot of us will be really honest and tell you our experience. And again, you need to, take it as you will, but remember everybody's experience is very different.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that piece of advice about reaching out to somebody who may look like you and and you know that they've been there before. I think there's no harm in reaching out to influencers, content creators, writers, travelers, anyone that you know. I think that's a really positive piece of advice that somebody can take with them. The last little piece we'll touch on here is at the very beginning, again, of this episode. You mentioned that you are known for your travel mishaps and misfortunes and the luck that happens while you're traveling. And travel can be unpredictable. And oftentimes they'll see your beautiful post in Greece on a sailboat and think, wow, she's living the life. Meanwhile, they didn't know that you nearly missed your train and, a conductor had to help you get on the other side of the country and, all the things. So what's one of your like crazier stories that you can share about when things didn't go to plan? And on the flip side of that is how do you manage your stress levels when that happens, especially when you're alone?
Because as you said, like the misadventure thing is a theme for me all the time. It's become a bit of a joke actually with people saying they don't want to be on the same flights as me. Like friends and everything. They're like, I'll travel with you, but I don't want to be on the same plane as you because it goes wrong. And the sad thing is they're not wrong. So yeah, so I had like those stories at the beginning. One of my favorite misadventure stories was again 22, just starting out. This was the part where I was like living in Ireland and I went to Germany. My parents had gone to Germany for their honeymoon years ago, and they always talked about this spot called Rothenburg, which is fairy tale village, and it was so beautiful. And I'm like, I would like to go there. And so I'm in Munich and I pull up the German train website and like it's enough that I can understand how to book my own ticket. So I thought. So I book my ticket to Rothenburg and I go to the train station with my bags and I'm like, wow, this is really far away. Like I thought it was much closer. I've got 3 trains to go through. I was like, whatever, like I have my book, I'll settle in. So I make it through all the transfers and I finally get on the last one and it is like a commuter train. And I'm like, oh, this is weird. I got the impression that this was like a city. I was like, whatever, I go with it. And pulls up to the stop, Rothenburg, and I get off and there's this child in front of me that is the only other person that gets off and he has got a school backpack and I can't remember what musical instrument he has, but he's carrying some kind of case that is a musical instrument, like clearly just from
Hmm.
school. And he kind of gives me a weird look as I'm sitting there with my backpack and he turns and goes up the hill and I try to non-creepily follow him up this hill in this forest. And we get over to the top and it is this very small, like farming village is probably the best way to describe it. And I'm like, this doesn't
Oh
seem
my
right. I was like,
gosh.
maybe if I go. So I'm walking around this tiny little community in November and I'm like, this can't be right. And I don't know where to go and I don't know what to do. And I don't see anything that's like obviously a restaurant or anything like that. And so I just knocked on somebody's door. This woman answers the door and I was like, in my stilted German, asked her if she spoke English. And she's like, yes. And I was like, oh, thank you. I'm so lost. And she goes, I think I know exactly
Oh
what you did.
no.
So she brings me into her house. She pulls up this map and she's like, I think you wanted to go to Rothenburg ob der Tober.
Oh, of course.
This is
Why
just
didn't you know that?
Rothenburg. Why didn't I know that? Why were there those extra names? So I was like, yes, I think you're right. So she looks up the train times because she's got this little thing on her wall because it's a little commuter train, right? And all the kids use it to go to school. Sends me back down to the station, which by the way is like a concrete slab in the middle of the forest. So I'm sitting here with my backpack in a concrete slab in the middle of the forest in cold November Germany weather. And I'm like, this is my parents' fault. They always just called it Rothenburg. And this is pre like having eSIMs and easy data, whatever. And I'm like, this is worth the money for a call home. And it was like 7 a.m. at home at this time. So call home and my mom answers, she's sleepy. And I'm like, I just want you to know, you've told me for years that it's this like Rothenburg. It is not. It is Rothenburg ob der Tober. And I'm currently in Rothenburg, which is a farming community hours away from where I need to be, sitting on a stone slab in the middle of a forest waiting for the
Oh
train.
my gosh.
So we like laugh about it. And she's like, okay, like let me know when you get there. So the train finally comes. I get on the train. They come for tickets. I explain to him what happens. He thinks it's hilarious. Fixes everything for me. I finally get to the real Rothenburg ob der Tober, get to my accommodation. They had been panicking because I was supposed to show up hours earlier. It is now nighttime. Restaurants and everything are closed. I'm like, I will just go to bed
Have your granola
and it'll
bar.
be fine. I can explore in the movie. Exactly. Have my extra granola bar, explore in the morning. And I pull up my laptop and I send my mom a quick email like, I made it. I didn't check to see that I was properly connected to the internet. I was not. The email did not send. So the last thing my mom heard from me for a day was that I was sitting on a concrete slab in the middle of the forest, lost and sure.
Oh my gosh. Your poor mom.
So yeah, she freaked out a little bit. And I woke up the next morning with again like a ton of emails like, where are you? I was like, oh, sorry. Like I thought I sent this and apparently wasn't connected to the internet. So it was all fine. But I've been back a few times now and I've been with her too because it is Rothenburg October is like one of the most magical places, especially at Christmas. And I just always laugh every time I go here and I'm like, yeah, that was was one of my favorite stories.
So how do you manage like your emotions during that time? You're by yourself. This is, back when there's, like you said, not readily, data service, eSIMs, all the things. You just can't just like switch on your travel pass and there you are, you have your phone. How do you manage that? Like, oh shit, I'm lost. I can't really speak the language that well. How do I manage this? Like, and this is not just a one-off example. You have a lot of stories for better or for
Yes.
worse that are similar to this. So how have you learned, I guess, to manage your stress levels during these moments?
I think you just reach the point where you're like, okay, there, like, I need to fix this. There's nobody else that can't say, hey, mom, or, somebody call an adult in. This is on me. So you kind of just get into that mode where you need to make it happen. And I freaked out like more than my share of times. I'm at the point now where I'm like, oh, here we go again. And people get, impressed about how calm I stay. But it's just, okay, step one, step two, step three. And I think it's also good in a lot of ways too, because I've learned that, obviously you still need to be careful, especially as a woman traveling, but it's okay to trust people. And a lot of people are willing to help you out, especially when you're by yourself. And again, you need to be smart about who you ask and everything. But I have had some amazing stories and met some amazing people who have gone through their way to help me when I've done something stupid and ended up lost. And so, yeah, the crazy stories turned into good memories and everything's worked out so far. Maybe not how it should, maybe more expensive or more time consuming than it should have been, but I'm still here and everything has worked out. And I just kind of got to keep that in mind. I'm like, you'll figure it out. It'll be okay.
I do. When you were talking, in my mind, the thing that came to me was everything works out. Like maybe not exactly how you think it should, but it will eventually work itself out. And I think that's an important thing to
Exactly.
remember when you're traveling.
And it's a great story for later.
It's a great story for later. Exactly. So if you could think back to, you mentioned like your 18-year-old self, or when you were just starting out when you were 22, if you could give one piece of advice or encouragement to your younger self, what would it be?
Not to care so much. Also, that age, you're just like, I just avoided looking in the mirror so much of it was like hating my body and not wanting to go places or do things because of how I looked and holding myself back from things like going to beaches and stuff when I travel because I didn't want people to see me in a swimsuit. And it's just like, stop caring so much. And again, one of the biggest things I tell myself and I tell other people, like, think of what your body does for you more so than necessarily how it works. And you don't need to love your body, but you can learn to respect it that way. And I wish I had learned that earlier than I actually did.
Yeah, and I mean that piece alone is you don't have to make the full jump into full-blown self-love, like, just start with respect, and then you build
Yep.
yourself up piece by piece. Thank you so much for sharing that and for sharing your story. I think this will land with a lot of women and a lot of people who are listening to the podcast, so thank you. We end our podcast with 3 rapid-fire questions I haven't shared ahead of
Oh,
time, so if you're ready, we'll see what comes up for you. So, number 1
okay.
is what country or place has left the biggest impact on you?
Antarctica. I've been twice now. And, I think being lucky enough to have this lifestyle and have traveled so much, I've been to 80 countries so far, many of them multiple times. I travel 5, 6 months of the year, and it's a huge privilege. And I think sometimes I kind of forget that, and it's easy to just take it for granted. And I went to Antarctica, and it just kind of blew my mind. And I wrote myself a postcard, and it said, when you feel like the world loses its magic, come back to Antarctica. And I mean, I didn't expect to go back so quickly. As I said, I went in 2023 and I just came back a week ago from my second trip and I go there again. And it was just that same, just like awe-inspiring, super excited to be there. And I have yet to find another place that makes me feel like there.
Yeah, that's on my list for sure. I think that's one of our big it's been my husband's bucket list forever, but we have 2 really small kids. So I'm like, "Okay, well, we can't go away for 23 days, and I don't really feel like taking them on this trip yet." So that'll be one we do a little bit later, but thank you for reminding
Totally. So
me to
worth it.
keep that at the top of my list. So number 2 is what's your must-have, like your favorite travel item or accessory?
I have like a list of things that I regularly go with. But as a curvy girl, Body Glide.
Mm.
Because it helps like the chafing of the thighs. If you're wearing shorts, if you're wearing a sundress, it helps chafing on like if you have like a backpack. I've used it to help with backpack straps. I've used it for blisters on my heels. And it's not a liquid. It goes on like a deodorant and it has been a lifesaver more times than I could count.
Amazing. I love that. And then number 3 is what's the biggest life lesson that you've learned while traveling?
I think just like we were just talking about it, like everything will work out. I think you go through life growing up and you're just like, I have to know what I want to do to go to university and I have to get in the world and do this job. At least like that's how I felt. And, my dad got sick and my plans didn't work out. And I went to Ireland for a job and that didn't work out. But like here I am all this time later and I am living kind of like this dream life that I never even imagined for myself. But it's not perfect. And there are still things that I think might be missing or, things I need to focus on. But in the end, I'm happy and everything has worked out. So just kind of like trust myself and trust the process and, let things happen.
Thank you so much for sharing that and for sharing your story. I'm really excited for our community to connect with you. So if they were like, wow, Hannah's amazing. I want to connect with her online, or I want to go travel with her. What's coming up for you and how can they connect with you?
So I'm definitely most active on Instagram. So it's Hannah Logan 21. My blog is eatsleepbreathetravel.com. I have a newsletter there as well. Group trips, most of them are sold out for 2025. I do have a few spots left. I'm running a European Christmas market tour because I adore Christmas markets. And fun fact, we are going to Rothenburg on October.
The right one.
The one, don't worry. So I have a few spots left there. And I actually just yesterday launched my first for 2026. It's a big one. It's gorilla and chimpanzee trekking in Uganda and Rwanda.
Fun.
And I have a few spots there as well. So I tend to, again, just because I think I have a big community on Instagram and it's an easy way for people to, kind of see who I am as a person and get a vibe of what my travel style is like. I tend to launch and sell them primarily through Instagram, but I do share on my blog and I do share in my newsletter as well.
Awesome. And you also have a book, right? I believe you're writing something
I
fun.
do.
Can you share a little sneak peek into that?
I secretly wrote a book last summer and I decided to share it in December with everybody, including my family. I was just like, oh, so I wrote a book. I shocked everybody. But I wanted the kind of book that is a novel. So I wanted kind of the book that, you want to pick up before you go on a plane, on a beach vacation, just like a fun read that might get you a little excited about travel, might inspire you to travel somewhere. So it's a contemporary romance and it takes place in Greece and the female main character is, curvy and bigger as well. So there's a little bit of that content in there as well. And I'm in the process. I figure because I have like an online community and everything already, I figured I would do the whole self-publishing thing. So I've had a few people read it while I was in Antarctica. The feedback has been amazing. And I'm working on, the rest of the process, which is, let me tell you, a process.
Yes.
It's very intimidating, but that's what I'll be working on the next couple of months. And my aim is to get it out. It's very much like a summer beach read. So my aim is to get it out in spring.
Amazing. All right. Well, check back in when you do launch it. We'll share it with our community. And in the meantime, I'll link all the places and all the things for people to connect with you in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun and it was nice to talk to you and kind of face to face.
I know, right? We've been
we've
been orbiting social circles online for a decade and here we are finally. So, but maybe we won't wait another 10 years till we see each other again.
I know. Maybe we'll actually meet in person.
Could you imagine? Thank you. And that's a wrap for this incredible episode. I want to give a huge shout out to our podcast partner and Beyond for supporting the show. Check out the link in the show notes to learn more about their unforgettable journeys around the world. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Transform with Travel podcast. If you have a friend or a loved one you were thinking of during this episode, spread a little love and share this episode with them, someone who could use a little inspiration. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe to the podcast as well. To learn more about us, head to www.transformwithtravel.co, and I'll see you on the next episode. This is your reminder to keep on exploring.